2006 Honda Odyssey rack and pinion replacement. I'm Brian Eslick from How To Automotive. I'm going to walk you through the process of replacing that. First step you want to do is get your vehicle racked up. So one of my first steps I'm going to do is I'm going to center the steering wheel. I'm going to remove the key from the ignition lock and actually get the steering wheel to lock in place like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to crawl under here by the gas pedal and brake pedal here, and I'm going to peel the carpet back, and I'm going to take this little cover off here, this plastic cover off, and they just have these little plastic screw nuts. A couple of these, and you'll remove those and remove this whole plastic cover off. Now that you got the cover off, you can go ahead and remove this 12mm bolt right here. So after removing the bottom bolt, I went ahead and loosened the top bolt a few threads. And now what you're going to do is just take this whole slip joint and slide it up and off the rack and pinion. So when you're done, it'll look like that, and then you can just pull the shaft in towards the brake pedal. Next step is go ahead and remove the front tires. So my next step is going to be to loosen up the jam nut. So I just used my 19mm wrench, and on the driver's side I loosen towards the front of the car, just back it off a few threads. On the passenger side, you're going to pull towards the back of the car like that, and then loosen it up a few threads. After that, we're going to remove the cotter pins on both outer tie rods and remove the nut. So next we need to get the tie rod off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spin the nut back on the outer tie rod just a few threads, and I'm going to strike it right here with my hammer a few times, and that's going to pop the tie rod free from the spindle here. So I'm going to strike the spindle right here a few times just like that, and it'll pop that way it doesn't damage the boot. You can reuse it if you need to. And you're going to do that for the left and right side. Now what I like to do, now that I got the tie rod off, is I like to spin the outer tie rod off. That way when we go to take the rack and pinion out, there's less things for it to snag on and stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the tie rod and count how many threads. And the reason I'm going to count them is when we put it back on, we're going to count them back on, try to keep the alignment in the ballpark. So I'm going to start with my tie rod pointing down like this, and then go 1, 2, 3, and I'm just going to keep doing it until it comes all the way off, and then write that number down for the left and right side. So now I'm going to go ahead and remove the power steering lines from the rack and pinion itself. So I'm looking in through the driver's side here. Go ahead and remove the return line here. You can take the hose off, or you can go ahead and take the 14mm little bolt, the stud, off. So I actually found it easier to remove the 14mm stud and just loosen this clamp up, and the stud will spin inside the hose, and then take the hose off, and then on the back side over here I'll remove the power steering line from over here. So the way I got to the high pressure line here on the rack and pinion side was I used a crow's foot and then an extension, and then my ratchet over here. Cracked it free a couple of turns, and now I can spin it off by hand. So now that we got the power steering hoses off, we're going to work on getting the rack and pinion itself out of the car. And one of the first steps we need to do is remove this heat shield right here. So if you take your hand and feel up above it, there's a 12mm bolt right about here. So we're going to go ahead and remove that bolt, and then if you come around on the other side of the subframe here, just above the the flex pipe here on the exhaust, there's a 10mm bolt there. You can go ahead and remove that. The heat shield bolts both turned out to be 10mm bolts. So now that you got that out, you're going to follow your rack and pinion right here, and then there's going to be a 14mm bolt here, and then on the other side right here is a 14mm bolt. So you're going to take that off here and here, take those off. So after getting the bolts off here, now the rack and pinion on this side of the car is free, and you can actually reach up and take this bracket off right here. So this metal bracket that goes over the rack and pinion will slide off, and I recommend you take it off so when you slide it through the car it won't snag on anything. So take the bracket off. So now we're going to come over here, and on the subframe here, we're going to remove the bolt here, and here the 19mm bolts, and that's the other mounts for the front of the rack and pinion. And we'll go ahead and remove those. So when I went to take these two bolts out here for the rack and pinion, they had a nut on the back side, so I had to reach over the back with a wrench and back and hold the nut while I use my impact gun to pull the bolts out here. Okay, so now the rack and pinion is pretty much unbolted, but what we need to do is drop the subframe here down, and the reason why is we need to clear the steering shaft up here on the firewall here, and to do that we need to drop the subframe. Here, to get started, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a couple of these pole jacks here, and I'm going to put them in one on this side of the subframe here and one on this side of the subframe. What we're going to do is we're going to loosen the left side of the subframe and lower it. We're also going to loosen the right side of the bolts on the right side, but we're going to do most of the lifting and lowering with the driver side here. So I'm going to go ahead and position those there, and the next step before I start taking anything apart is I'm going to take this front shield off. So on mine it's kind of barely held on with zip ties and stuff, but yours is going to have little clips like this. So you go ahead and remove the clips. Just follow the outside perimeter until you get this. Removing clips until this comes off all the way to the passenger side, because we're going to loosen bolts over here too. So my next step is on the driver's side here. I'm going to remove the sway bar link-in from the strut here on the top, and that's going to help lower the subframe and everything down enough to clear for us. So we'll go ahead and remove the bolt here, and then pop the sway bar link-in out. So on the driver's side, what I did was I took the pole jacks and put them under the suspension and the subframe here, and then I went ahead and removed the bracket and the bolt that went here on the left-hand corner, the back corner. I removed the whole bracket, and then what I did was I did the same thing for the front on this side, and then I used the pole jacks to spin the lower the subframe down. And then also on this side, on the passenger side, I loosened the threads about a ½ inch or so. You can see there, being careful not to take the thread them all the way out. And then I loosened the bracket bolt here, and then did the same thing for the corner here. I loosened these two bolts here, and then loosened this bolt a couple threads, and now and then just lower the subframe down with the transmission jack slowly, a little on the left, a little on the right, a little on the left, a little on the right. And then once you do that, you'll get to an area where low enough where it's actually clear up here. And then once it's cleared, then you pull the rack and pinion like this, and now you're just going to twist and rotate and twist and rotate. You may even have to lower the pole jack down a little bit more and use a pry bar and pry down a little bit, and get enough clearance to maneuver the rack and pinion into an area where you can get it out of the car. So let's go in to take the rack and pinion out, and it just won't quite clear the frame here. I got it out of the hole for the firewall, but it won't quite clear the frame, and you can move it around, and it's real close. So what I'm going to do is I went ahead and used 3 pole jacks. So I got one on the left front corner, one on the left rear corner, and I'm going to hook it on the suspension here, and I got one on the right side. So I'm going to go ahead and remove on the back side. I'm going to go ahead and remove the bolt completely. I removed the bolt completely on the back side here, and remove the bolt completely over here, and leave this bolt just loose, but definitely don't want to take this one back out. And then what I'm going to do after I get all the bolts down, I'm going to lower the subframe and engine and transmission down about another ½ inch or so, just enough to clear the spline for the rack and pinion here. So now, as you can see, I got the subframe lowered down at least 3.5 4 inches here, and now you can see it's going to clear. So now you just keep lowering it, and then you can use a pry bar a little bit and pry it down just a little bit and work it out. Just make sure you got enough pole jack for getting your rack and pinion out, and transferring over any parts that may not have come with your new rack and pinion. We're about ready to put it back in the car, but before we do that, I wanted to show you the part numbers. We're using a genuine Honda power steering rack. Now you can see the path where the rack and pinion has come out. So now we're going to take our new one and we're going to slide it back in position. Before we put it back in, I'm going to leave this rubber mount that was on the old rack I'm going to leave it off, and I'm going to put it back on once I get the rack and pinion back in the car. It's going to aid and help reduce things that could snag on. So leave this little rubber bracket off for right now, and we'll put that on in a minute. So now we're just going to stab it, this side in first. So I'm going to just stab it through here, like so. And you just kind of maneuver the rack and pinion in different areas and ways. And I'm going to go on the other side and help guide it through and pull through here. Kind of get snagged on things in here, so you just kind of help guide it in. Okay, once you get it back in there, since it's already lowered down, you can go ahead and start the main bolts that mount the rack and pinion in. So you can go ahead and start the bolts that go through here, and just start them by hand. And then since it's down here and we got a lot of extra room, you go ahead and put that rubber grommet back in over the rack and pinion, and put the bracket that goes over here and the 2 bolts, and start those by hand. Now that you got all 4 bolts started, go ahead and tighten them down. The back ones I don't have a torque spec for, so just tighten them down till they're snug. And then the front ones here, these torque down at 60 foot-pounds. So now that I got the hoses hooked back up, the rack and pinion is remounted and bolted back down. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to slowly take the 4-corner pull jacks. I'm going to start lowering it up. So I'm going to lift this one up. I'm going to lift it up about a ½ inch or so, and then I'm going to move to the next one. Move it about a ½ inch or so, and I'll move this one about a ½ inch or so, and then I'll repeat the cycle until the subframe is flush against. And your subframe is going to have a little movement left or right, and you're going to probably have to use a pry bar to kind of line everything up. So slowly move it up as high as you can before you put any of the bolts through. After getting the subframe run all the way up to where it's just barely touching the body of the car, what I'm going to do is take a little bit of this blue Permanex thread locker. I'm going to put it on the threads of the subframe bolts, the big one and the small ones. So a couple little dabs will do. And what this does is help prevent the bolts from vibrating back out, and you don't want to have any subframe bolts loosening up on you. So go ahead and put a little bit of the blue thread locker, and if you don't have this, it is available at my website at howtoautomotive.com on the tools and product page. So now that you got the blue Loctite on all the bolts, go ahead and start all 4 corners by hand, and run all 4, so all the brackets back in by hand. And once you get all 4 corners in, what you're going to do is you're going to run them in with your impact gun until they just snug, and then we'll torque them down, and I'll tell you the specs in a second. Okay, so after you run them in with an impact gun until they're all flush, all 4 corners, all the little bolts and the big bolts, you can torque the big bolts down to 74 foot-pounds, all 4 corners, and the smaller bolts that are mounted on the brackets on all 4 corners are at 54 foot-pounds. So you want to make sure you get them on all 4 corners. And then here's a little diagram that of all the torque specs of the subframe, and this is courtesy of All Data. Now that the subframe is torqued down, you can go ahead and reinstall your plastic. Now you can go ahead and reinstall your sway bar link in and tighten the bolt down. Now that you got the front shield back on, you can go ahead and put the heat shield that you took off that went back here on the back of the rack and pinion on the passenger side. Okay, so now we're ready to spin on our outer tie rods. You want to make sure you got the jam nuts on first, so screw those in. And then, if you remembered, you counted them off, so we're going to count them back on the same amount that we counted them off left and right. So, 1, 2, 3, up until the number whatever it was when you just go ahead and stab the tie rods back through the spindles, run the nuts in and tighten them up, and then put new cotter pins in on left and right side. After the tie rods are tightened, now you can go ahead and spin on your jam nut up against it and snug it up and tighten it up, left and right side. Now you can go ahead and install your wheels back on and torque the lug nuts to 76 foot-pounds. So now that you got the tires back on, you can lower the vehicle down, and you want to make sure the tires are pointing as straight as can be on left and right side. So you want to center them as best you can to their dead center. And then what we're going to do is slide our steering coupler back on. So you just slide it back over the rack and pinion and slide it down, and then we'll start the bolts through. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start the bolt, and then I'm going to fill the car up with power steering fluid. I'm going to drive the car down on a straight line here in my parking lot. And if the steering wheel is really far off to the left or really far off to the right, what I'm going to have to do is you can pull back over and slide this back up so you can center it. So you drive it and you slip it on, drive it. If it's really far off to one side or the other, you can slide it back up and turn it 1 or 2 teeth, slide it back on, and then do it until you satisfied where the car is at, and the car is pretty the steering wheel is pretty straight and the car is driving straight as can be. The alignment's going to be off a little bit, so it's not going to be perfect. You just want it in the ballpark. And once you get it back on where you like it, then you can tighten this up, and then you'll put this plastic cover that you took off back on and flip the carpet and all that stuff back up and out of the way. And then after that, the last step would be to take the car and have it aligned, and that'll complete the rack and pinion installation on a 2006 Honda Odyssey. I'm Brian Eslick from How To Automotive. I'd like to thank you guys for watching my videos and encourage you to subscribe. Thank you again.